Hey everyone, it's Jesse, and we're doing something a little bit different today. So, there's a big ask recently for what the meta game is in Value Vintage. It's something that comes up probably what feels like once a week, every 2 weeks or so. We're talking about what the best decks in the format are, what you should expect to play against. And the tough thing is, it's really hard to answer this question because the format is one, so broad, two, most of the places you're going to be playing, barring the online leagues or the 1Ks, are going to be very local dependent. And third, since it's just such kind of a big the big brewers paradise, you kind of end up with people trying some unusual things. I know me personally, I have some meta decks, but normally what I do best with are decks that I kind of come up on my own or take from another format. So truthfully, it's kind of hard to answer that question. But what I wanted to do today is to just go through. I asked some of the admins and the mods in the Discord, and I went through and did a little bit of my own research. And we just kind of wanted to say, not really what the metagame is, but if I was going to go somewhere or if I wanted to bring up some decks to some people who are interested in playing, what exactly would I expect to see, or what should I maybe sit down and prepare against if I were going to a larger event? So, what I just did today is I have 8 decks that I just want to bring up to you guys so that way you can look at them, see what they kind of look like, maybe go over a little bit of what the strategy is, just so you have an idea on what you could expect whenever you go to an event, especially if you end up going to any of the Star City events. Apex Gaming in Ohio does them every weekend. I know personally Eternal Weekend is coming up this weekend for me, so some of these are on my radar when I go there. And really any of the online leagues. I mean, I think that for the most part, at least one of these decks has been in like most of the online leagues that we've done. So to start out, we're going to go over, this is actually Everett's high tide list. The reason that I want to show this one specifically is because this is probably the list that most players go to whenever they first get into the format trying to learn about high tide. It's just the most visible deck. There's a primer for it. Everett has been one of the longest standing players in Value Vintage since it started. So the idea with this deck is going to be very similar to the high tide strategies that you would know from any of the other formats that you would have seen it played. You're going to cast a high tide. You're going to cast some cantrips, some spells that untap. Something that's really good about our format is a lot of these spells are cheap, like Turnabout and Frantic Search. Very powerful cards, very crucial for the high tide strategy, but we get to play them here. The islands don't count towards the budget, so a 30-year main deck is actually free. And we're doing some powerful things here, like Trade Secrets. I think this card was restricted or banned in Commander or something at some point, but the card's very powerful. There's a couple of different win conditions as well. We do get Cunning Wish to pull some things out of the board. There's also a loop with Lutri and, excuse me, Bond of Insight. So you can, with enough mana and a snap, you can keep picking up Lutri, Bond of Insight to copy it. I mean, I've actually started playing the deck recently just so that way I can get used to it and get more comfortable with it. And it like gives me a migraine. It's like not my type of deck, but this is arguably what I would say is one of the most played decks in the format in terms of just the most popular combo deck, I would say. So if you're expecting to sit down against somebody playing a combo deck, if you have somebody who wants to get in the format that's really interested in a combo, High Tide's a good starting point. It's pretty safe budget-wise. A lot of the cards are uncommons or commons that support the strategy, and there's a lot of flexibility. There's actually 2 other High Tide lists that are starting to see some play. One of them revolves around, I'm blanking on the card name, but it's from one of the recent Phyrexian sets where it's just draw a card, your opponent gets a poison counter. And then the new Fallout card, Rad Storm, where you proliferate and it has Storm. So you try to Storm kill them. And then Reset recently was printed in Mystery Booster 2. Because of that, the price has gone down a ton. So now that we have some people that are messing with Reset Tide. So a lot of different ways you could take the deck. It's definitely very cool. It's definitely cool to see it with how powerful it's been in the past in other formats, and then we get to play it in ours. The next deck that I would want to talk about here is Affinity. So obviously we don't get a lot of the high-powered cards that the other formats get with Affinity, like Urza Saga, Mox Opal. Those aren't cards that we really get access to here, and that's just solely based off price. But that's okay because a lot of the core of Affinity with your Ornithopters, um, things like Cranial Plating, Springleaf Drum, those are very cheap. We also get some supplemental cards that a lot of people would, kind of forget about, like the artifact lands that are actually banned in Modern. So we do get to do some powerful things here that we don't get to do in some of the other formats. In Pauper, we don't get to see anything that's above a common, obviously. So a lot of these supplemental cards, like Up the Beanstalk and Kozilek's Unsealing, we don't get to see these. And in the same vein, some of these cards are a little bit underpowered for the premier formats that would get like Mox Opal and Urza Saga. So, it's an interesting take. We obviously get Soul Ring too. This is like huge for Affinity. It's essentially, adding 3 for any cards that have Affinity. But the deck does just kind of your normal Affinity things. We're just trying to power out a lot of the cheap artifacts early, cast some Thought Monitors. This list isn't playing Thoughtcast because it isn't free. I think it's roughly close to $1. But you do get a lot of draw between Up the Beanstalk and Unsealing. So the idea is you're just going to keep chaining some big guys, drawing some cards, ideally amassing enough that you can find a Cranial Plating, and then end up just kind of, blowing your opponent out. So there's a couple other variants of Affinity as well. My personal list, I'm not doing the Beanstalk or Kozilek's Unsealing. My version is just kind of more in like your traditional older lists where, like I have some Vault Scourges. I'm actually on Cranial Rams. But there's a lot of different ways you could take it because the core of the deck is very cheap. And other than Ancient Den and Great Furnace, the rest of the artifact lands are actually pretty cheap. So a lot of different ways you could take this, but it's something you kind of want to be prepared for. It's one of the premier artifact strategies outside of something like maybe Thopter Sword. All right, this deck here, if you're a big fan of Jund or any old school mid-range strategies, or even a fan of Lurrus, this may be a deck for you. This is Red-Black Lurrus. So once again, this is Everett's list. It's also one of the early kind of go points for anybody looking to learn the deck. But something interesting about it is, and I'll actually stop here. So he's on 2 Corey Steelcutter, and as you can see, this card is $9, still under budget overall for the deck. The idea with Red Black Lurrus is you're playing a lot of cheap and efficient removal and discard. And that comes through Inquisition and Hymn to Torok, Lightning Bolt, Galvanic Discharge. Most of the Lurrus decks that are red-black are on the energy package with Amped Raptor. And if you look at the cost of the average card in this deck, it's very cheap. Overall, a lot of the cards here are actually going to be under budget. Most of the time in VV, your average card should cost about 40 cents if everything costs the same. So with this, a lot of these cards you see, Blood Tithe Harvester is 11 cents, Amp Raptors are only 8 cents, absurd. Galvanic Discharge 10. These are all important cards for the strategy. But with that, you end up with a lot of budget that's free. So a lot of the Red-Black Lurrus players are choosing to do different things. Looks like Everett is trying Corey Steelcutter. I have a list myself. A couple things that I'm doing is I know that I have the playset of Blackleaf Cliffs. Nothing wrong with the mana base that Everett has. I'm a huge fan of that. I'm also on the full 4 baubles, where Everett's only on the 2. So you have a lot of flexibility with the shell. I'd say that the core probably, we'll say 40 to 50 cards in the main deck are probably the same. But that last bit of flexibility, you get a lot of money out of it. But any fan of just a Jund style strategy or, your normal mid-range, this is definitely a deck you want to check out because it is reminiscent of a lot of the older mid-range strategies. And it can compete just due to the fact that it has the flexibility of Bolt to pressure the combo decks. You have your discard to interact with them as well. And then you're also pretty low to the ground just because, Blood Tithe Harvester is a 3-2, Bronco can pressure, and you just have Croxa. So definitely a good strategy to look into if you're a big fan of mid-range gaming. All right, our next deck, this is a recent iteration of Boros Energy. Obviously, we do not get a Johnny. We do not get Ocelot Pride. But what we do get is Guide of Souls and Amped Raptor. So 2 very powerful cards. And the idea with this strategy is you're playing all of the, once again, cheap effects like Static Prison, you're playing Galvanic Discharge, and you get to play the full 4 Guide of Souls. Guide of Souls being $13 of this deck's $30 budget is insane, given that you're literally building the remaining 71 cards off of $17. So contextually, that seems kind of absurd. However, when you look at the average cost of the cards in this deck as well, everything is very cheap. And it's mainly because the supporting cast of this is just commons and uncommons. However, for anybody that's familiar with Pauper, or even, a little bit of the modern package, I mean, these are some powerful cards that we get to play with here. So very similar to Red but Black Luris in the sense that it's kind of like a mid-range energy shell. You do have some very strong starts where you can play something like a Synthesizer or an Astrolabe, Gleeful Demolition it. You can also start with like God of Souls into Afteraptor. Brotherhood Scribe, this card you may have never seen before. It's from the Fallout set, but it's an absolute house. Every creature that you would play with a God of Souls and a Brotherhood Scribe out is going to anthem your team for the turn. So doing something like God of Souls, Brotherhood Scribe, Pixie to pick up maybe an Astrolabe or Synthesizer that's going to buff your board, maybe cast it again to like draw a card, play another guy. You grow your board very quick. And keep in mind, the more energy that you make, you're going to be able to do the God of Souls trick to grow something and make it fly. All of this still with the fact that you get to play Luris as your companion. So it's kind of a new strategy. I want to say it was over the summer this year that somebody put it together for an event. But it's definitely seeing a lot more play. A lot of times the lower to the ground aggro decks don't see a ton of play in Value Vintage. But this one is actually causing a little bit of, sideboard pivots where a lot of people didn't really want to be on low to ground sweepers or like, something like a Pyroclasm effect. But you're starting to see a lot more of that in the sideboards that people are prepping. So definitely something you want to keep in mind if you're a mid-range or control deck that you might need an answer that's a little earlier than what you're expecting. All right, this deck now, this is Rhinos or Crashing Footfalls. So something unique about this format is we have access to the vintage ban list. With the vintage BNR, there are a lot of options. So Cascade is a strategy that is very popular. We have a lot of iterations. We have Living End, we have Hypergenesis, we obviously have Rhinos, like you see. However, one thing that makes this deck very powerful is, one, the fact that we get the 8 Spirit Guides. So there's even the chance you could get a turn 0 Cascade. And with that, we're always cascading into our Crashing Footfalls to make 2 4/4s. Well, as you saw in some of the other decks that we've already shown so far, while those decks can do powerful things, if you even turn 2 a Rhino, sometimes that's good enough. But being able to do it on 1 or even on 0, before you draw anything is definitely a powerful way to, start the game. Not only that, this deck gets some of the, more degenerate cards that we've seen in recent years with the initiative creatures. So originally designed for multiplayer, obviously it's had some problems in Eternal formats, especially with White Plume Adventurer. Here, if you end up not being able to do your Rhino plan, or if the game has slowed down enough that you're just on 3 to 4 mana where you could power one out, these creatures can actually take away the game. And it's hard to pull back the initiative from an opponent, especially if there's a board stall and you end up with, 1 or 2 Rhinos, or even these creatures are sized pretty well. So the idea with it is you're either powering out Rhinos or we want to power out an initiative creature, and we're just hoping that that can carry us through. And another thing that we're not going to ignore is the 3 Minson that this is actually a friend of mine, Devin. He won one of the, I think actually 2 of the online events, but he won one of our MTGO tournaments that we had through the Discord. You just get to play this card. This card's just in the deck. This card's $1.18. This is absurd. But these are all powerful things that you get to do. The weakest thing about the deck is obviously it is a Cascade deck, so without your guides, you can be a little bit slower, and you also don't interact too much, just due to the fact that you're kind of looking to just go as quick as you can. But it's a strong strategy. It kind of ebbs and flows. I think people who normally play it want to try some new things sometimes, but this deck is very real. It's something that you should expect to sit down against or sit down alongside someone who's playing it and you just want to be ready to deal with the rhinos if they come. This slot was kind of tricky. So my goal here was to focus on a blue-white control deck. Blue-white's very popular. We have a couple different iterations. I couldn't really find a list that I wanted to showcase. I'm personally a fan of blue-white energy field, which is rest in peace and energy field. However, not a lot of players seem to want to play that deck. It doesn't show up a lot in the results. The next two options that I see the most of are standstill and miracles. So I went and I looked at a couple standstill lists. A couple of them were a little bit over budget. We're going to ignore that. A couple of them are over budget. Outside of that, it's still a good strategy and something that you should prepare to kind of play against if you're seeing a blue-white opponent. But I actually think that miracles is something that's a little bit underexplored. And it also kind of ebbs and flows where there's cards that, it doesn't really get new cards because the miracle cards are really unique. However, I think, personal bias aside, I think that miracles is actually one of the better iterations of blue-white control for the format. It just gets Entreat the Angels is just a very powerful card. A lot of the package for it is very cheap. Something like Standstill, the cards are not the cards, but Standstill itself is a little pricey. It's not crazy pricey, but it does eat up a fair bit of the budget. Whereas in Miracles, the Miracle cards are all very cheap. I mean, these are under your normal price of a card for the deck. You get to play. A lot of people like to play this Elminster. He's a really cool card. I'm a big fan of anybody playing anything that looks like a pet card. Near and dear to my heart. But the idea with the strategy is just your traditional blue-white control. We're looking to just counter our opponent's spells. We're looking to, this person playing Memory Lapse, looking to utilize Swords to Plowshares, since this card is something we get to play in the format. But the idea is you're just doing your normal blue-white control thing. We have a couple sweepers. This deck's playing Ponder. You get the one of Brainstorm since it's restricted. But outside of this one, blue-white, there are a couple different blue-white iterations. Like I said, Ripfield, Standstill, Miracles. Reclamation is a pretty popular deck. That one isn't necessarily blue-white. There's a couple other iterations, but it's a pretty popular archetype as well. But ideally, if you go to an event, you're going to want to have a plan for a blue-white deck. Even blue-white Gearhulks is popular online. Shout out to Doot. I know that he's probably watching this and is going to be upset if I don't mention it. But ideally, you want to have some type of plan if you're sitting down against the control deck. All right, if you are not a fan of Nadu, please shield your eyes. Unfortunately, we do get to see it here. So I will be honest, I'm not going to go too much into how the combo of this iteration of Nadu works. If you're not familiar with Nadu, it is a combo deck that utilizes Nadu and anything with a free activation effect that targets a creature. So one example would be like Shuko that you can equip to a creature. The other ones would be like the Nomads and Core, which you target the Nadu creatures twice to get multiple triggers. But the idea with this deck, and it's a little, I'm a little loose on it because I remember reading about this current version where there's a Sun Titan loop and you use like this land to make a copy. I'm like I can't even, I don't understand. I would sit down if my opponent started doing it. I'd maybe cry just because it's like too much going on. But the idea with it is you have a Nadu, you have Nomads, and or Shuko. And what you're doing is you're repeatedly targeting the Nadu or other creatures in play to kind of do the Nadu thing. At some point, you'll find a Cephalid Illusionist. Then you start doing it to the Illusionist. And then you mill your deck. So you've milled your deck. Your Narcomoebas come in play. You have the Dread Return. You get back the Sun Titan. And then this is where it's like super convoluted, where, like I said, there's a Quarry. There's the Jolly Balloon Man. Like, I don't really know. Like, my personal goal out of 1K is I'm probably playing blue-white Ripfield, so I have a Rest in Peace in play, and this doesn't happen to me. But truthfully, there's a loop here where you end up getting to kill your opponent. I think it revolves around just making like infinite Sun Titans. I'm not really sure. But Nadu's a real deck. At the end of the day, not everybody's on this version. There's other versions with Labman. I know my personal version is on the old Angel of Glory's Rise, I think is the name, Azami and Labman. So that way, you can Dread Return the Angel of Glory's Rise, bring back those 2 humans, draw a card, and try to kill him with Labman. So there's different iterations on how you can take this. Some people are doing Scute Swarm stuff, where you can just kind of set that loop up. But I think there was a Zurin Orb one at 1.2 where you were like sacking all your lands, and like 2 of them were deserts or something. It was like people are doing all kinds of crazy stuff with Nadu. But the most important part about it is you get to do this here, and it's something that you should expect, especially now. It's starting to win events. I'm seeing it, with 3-0s and like 3-1s and stuff. I don't think we've seen it online just because it's kind of complicated to do online, but there's a lot of paper events I see with, a decent bit of people where they're playing this. And frankly, I'm nervous that I'll see it this weekend at Eternal Weekend. So just keep your eye out for Nadu. It's starting to pick up steam if you are starting to pick up your event locally. And then the last deck, this is a blue-white deck. It's not technically a blue-white control deck, I would say. But this deck is called Blue-White Bane. So, few different iterations of this. But the idea is you're kind of like a tempo deck. You're like in an odd spot where you're like kind of controlling the early game. So you're a bit of an early game control deck, but you pivot real hard to your top end of Sailor's Banes and Talarian Terrors. Another card that's getting picked up for these strategies is... Oh, this is interesting. Rusty, what are we doing here? Another card that's getting picked up is Aligned Heart. This is a newer card from the Dragonstorm Commander deck. It's kind of like a Monastery Mentor, but kind of not. But you really turn the corner once you're able to deploy one of your threats. So it's kind of where it's like, it's not really tempo. I don't really know if it's like control, because you shift so hard once you can get a Bane in play. Sometimes you can get a Bane in play super early, especially against combo. So I feel like since it has a balance, I have to call it control, but it is a little different than what you'd see from your normal blue-white control decks. But it's a very solid strategy. It's kind of becoming a more popular deck in the way that Boros Energy just kind of took off. But to me, I think that it's probably the best representation we have right now in terms of like a tempo deck. We have had different tempo decks kind of show up in the format, but consistency-wise, I think this is the closest thing we have, even though the threat suite is like pretty low. But it's definitely a powerful deck. I think I mentioned it earlier, but this is actually Russell's. He's one of the admins also in the Discord, and he's been one of our longest standing players. And this is a deck that he's played for a pretty long time. So it's definitely a powerful deck. It's definitely something you want to expect. There's a couple other iterations that people have tried of Bane, of like blue-green Bane with up the Beanstalk. And then I think we see some blue-black Bane every so often. So a lot of different things you can do with that strategy. But to me, as I said at the start of the video, if I was going to an event, these are all decks I have in mind. Not necessarily decks that I'm going to isolate sideboard slots to, but something that if I sit down, I need to at least think on how I'm going to play the matchup or how I'm going to sideboard. Because at a larger event, or even something where your locals are starting to look at like online decks that people are playing, this is what you'll probably see. These are decks that you would expect. So outside of that, lots of different things you can do in the format. I know that there's a lot of brewing that can happen. There's a lot of cards I didn't even showcase here. Uro is a popular card all of a sudden, just because he's gotten so cheap. You'll hear, I mentioned other Cascade decks, and there's just different things that, I see in the Discord. I'm like, I didn't even know this card was, cheap. I got killed with a broadside, what was it, Bombardiers or broadside, whatever it is. I thought that card was like $30. It's dropped a ton. So there's a lot of different things that you can experience when you're playing the format. But if I was preparing for an event, these are the decks that I would keep in mind. So with that, let me know what you guys think of the video. I've done some similar things like this where it's less gameplay and just more kind of going over the format. Let me know if this was helpful for you. If you're interested in the format, check out the Discord below. It lets you know about local events to your area. We talk about any big events that are coming up, and you can always get online games or check out whenever we're doing any of the online tournaments. I know that throughout the rest of the year, we have got some cool things going on, and then obviously, next year's a whole different year. So if you like the video, make sure you like, subscribe. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.